Now, from the Pope John Paul II Cultural Center in Washington, D.C., Raymond Arroyo.
Howdy. Great to see you all. Thanks for being here. What a nice audience. Welcome to the World Over Live. And thank you for being here as well. It is Veterans Day here in the United States, so we'd like to first extend a special thank you to all the men and women out there who have served or continue to serve in the military, protecting freedom and ensuring peace. First up tonight, why are so many Anglican clergy, parishes, and individuals coming to the Catholic faith? Is this a result of Pope Benedict's recent overture to disaffected Anglicans? Father Scott Hurd, a priest in Washington, D.C., charged with facilitating the transfer of Anglicans to the Catholic faith, will join us. And later, in the spirit of Veterans Day, we're going to be examining the life of a true hero, a World War II vet, a confidant of John Kennedy, and the former Archbishop of New Orleans, Philip Hannon, with whom I have a little affiliation. We'll get to that later. Peter Finney Jr. is here to discuss the memoir he co-authored with the Archbishop, appropriately titled The Archbishop Wore Combat Boots. I think it could be titled The Archbishop Still Wears Combat Boots, but we'll get to all of that a little later in the program. If you have any questions about these or any topics, this is your show. Give us a call, 1-800-221-9460 in the U.S. and internationally, 205-271-2980, or drop us an email at worldover@EWTN.com. There's a lot to cover, so let's start. Here's the brief news from the world over this week. For much of the free world, on Thursday, it was a day of remembrance for those who've served and those who have fallen. As Big Ben rang out on the 11th hour of the 11th day of the 11th month, the Allied nations of Western Europe commemorated the official end of the Great World War, Armistice Day. Since World War II, the day became known as Remembrance Day to the nations of the British Commonwealth and Veterans Day here in the United States. With President Barack Obama out of the country, Vice President Joe Biden laid a wreath at the tomb of the unknown soldier at Arlington National Cemetery. And violence against Christians in Iraq has escalated once again. At least 6 people were killed and dozens injured in a series of bombings in Baghdad earlier this week. Mortar shells and homemade bombs were detonated at several Christian homes in Baghdad. Al-Qaeda militants took credit for the attacks and again threatened more violence against Iraq's Christians. The attacks came on the same day Prime Minister Nouri al-Maliki visited the Baghdad Cathedral, where more than 50 people were killed last month. He pleaded with Christians not to leave Iraq and promised the government would do everything possible to encourage Christians to remain. And the Islamic Republic of Iran showed its softer side this week. State-run television released footage of a 2-day conference in Tehran organized by the Vatican's Pontifical Council for Interreligious Dialogue and Iran's Islamic Culture and Relations Organization. The meeting is the latest in a series of talks between Vatican officials and Shiite Muslim leaders from around the world. Cardinal Jean-Louis Turan led the delegation, which included leading Iranian Christians, among them the Archbishop of Tehran. Iranian President Mahmoud Ahmadinejad got in on the action as well. He warmly greeted and embraced Cardinal Turan. The Cardinal presented Ahmadinejad with a letter from Pope Benedict XVI. Its contents were not disclosed. For years, Iranian officials have sought Vatican support for its diplomatic conflicts with the United States and European nations. The Vatican has offered mediation, but has consistently declined becoming directly involved in the dispute over Iran's nuclear development. And Pope Benedict XVI was warmly received during his 2-day apostolic visit to Spain this past weekend. At Barcelona's iconic Sagrada Familia Church, the Pope strongly defended marriage, families and the rights of the unborn. He directly criticized Spain's recently passed laws allowing gay marriage, fast-track divorce, and easier abortion access. It was the second time in as many days that Pope Benedict criticized Spain's socialist government. He called for all of Europe to rediscover Christian teachings and apply them to everyday life. And the day before next week's consistory to create 24 new cardinals, Pope Benedict XVI has summoned the College of Cardinals to a special meeting. They'll discuss the liturgy, religious freedom, and the clerical abuse crisis. Now, many secular media outlets have been misreporting this meeting. Some claim that it's sort of a clerical sex abuse summit. That is not the case. It is merely one of the topics the cardinals have been asked to pray and reflect upon. The cardinals will also discuss Pope Benedict's establishment of Anglican Catholic Ordinariates in response to those seeking unity with the Holy See. And the high-level discussion on Anglican Catholic Ordinariates comes on the heels of the announcement that 5 Anglican bishops have resigned from their posts at the Church of England in order to establish an ordinariate. Church officials in England and Rome confirmed that the constitution of what would be the first such ordinariate is under study. In a joint statement, the 5 bishops called the Holy See's response to those seeking union with Rome generous. They said they remain grateful that the Church of England, or for the Church of England rather, but have also been dismayed to see Anglicans and Catholics move further apart on some of the issues of the day. Released this week, President George W. Bush's memoir, Decision Points, provides insight on his controversial decision to restrict the federal funding of embryonic stem cell research, and notably how that decision was influenced by Pope John Paul II. The former president recalled his emotional meeting with the Pope in 2001. He said he was moved by the Pope's personal witness in fragile health, suffering from Parkinson's. In discussing stem cell research with the Holy Father, he recalled that John Paul saw the promise in science, but was, quote, firm in his view that human life must be protected in all its forms. 3 weeks later, President Bush issued his executive order about the decision. The president paid a final homage to the Pope, noting ultimately, quote, I did feel a responsibility to voice my pro-life convictions and lead the country toward what Pope John Paul II called a culture of life, end quote. And the U.S. Bishop's Catholic Campaign for Human Development is facing criticism, just as they sought to dispel it. Accused for years of providing grants to questionable left-leaning organizations such as ACORN and others affiliated with abortion and homosexual rights advocacy, the bishops 2 weeks ago released a document announcing the review and renewal of the Catholic Campaign for Human Development. According to the Catholic watchdog group Reform CCHD Now, one of the grantees praised in the renewal document actually violates the document's precepts, which bars funds to groups that join coalitions which contradict fundamental Catholic moral and social teaching. Reform CCHD Now claims that the Florida-based Coalition of Immokalee Workers, which is one of the groups the bishops is funding, is associated with 2 coalitions that promote abortion and gay rights. The bishops will have a chance to sort all of this out before the nationwide pre-Advent collection for the CCHD when they meet next week in Baltimore for their annual fall meeting. And if you want to see what the bishops have to say about this and a few other issues, be sure to tune into our live coverage of the U.S. Conference of Catholic Bishops' annual fall meeting. EWTN has agreed to carry the meeting without commentary. The bishops' public sessions will air Monday and Tuesday live. Check EWTN.com for times. Besides a vote on the renewal of the CCHD, the bishops will consider a new ecumenical agreement on baptism, a policy statement against physician-assisted suicide, and much more. The conference is also expected to elect several new officers, including a new president. Cardinal Francis George of Chicago completes his 3-year term at next week's meetings. And for those of you who actually work for a living, I don't expect you to sit home and watch the bishops. Next Thursday, the world over will bring you a complete wrap-up of the Bishops' Conference. We'll have exclusive interviews, put the meeting in context, and offer you our unique commentary. I'll be joined by Monsignor Stuart Swetland of Mount St. Mary's for that. That's next Thursday on the World Over Live. And if you're planning a trip to D.C., why not attend the World Over? Thursdays at 8 p.m. Eastern. Drop us an email. We're at worldoverdc@yahoo.com, and we'll reserve a seat for you. You can always find that info at raymondarroyo.com in case you lose that email address. When we return, Father Scott Hurd on the recent news about Anglican bishops in the UK converting to Catholicism. What does it mean to Anglicanism worldwide and here in the U.S.? The World Over Live continues in a moment. Stay with us.
Now, once again, Raymond Arroyo.
Welcome back to the World Over Live. It was just a year ago that Pope Benedict unveiled a plan to establish a structure for Anglicans who wish to enter the full communion or into full communion with Catholicism. The Apostolic Constitution Anglicanorum Coetibus was released in November of 2009, and it set up a unique Anglican Ordinariate, which aims to help disaffected Anglicans, Episcopalians in the U.S., to reunite with Rome. My first guest is a priest of the Archdiocese of Washington, where he's director of the Office of Deacons, but he's been recently appointed to assist Cardinal-designate Donald Wuerl in the application of this pontifical outreach to the Anglican community. Father Scott Hurd joins the program. Thanks for being here, Father.
Pleasure to be here. Thank you.
Now, we hear the story this week, 5 bishops in England converting to Catholicism. They want to come into full communion. The Times of London, the Telegraph have been going crazy reporting this story, the BBC. What does it mean, and what's inspiring these men? What's driving them in this direction?
Sure. Well, these 5 individual bishops who've decided to take this move have always been Catholic in their Christian self-identity. Within Anglicanism, you can find a spectrum of practices and beliefs, some more akin to Catholicism's, some perhaps not quite as close to Catholicism. So these 5 bishops would call themselves Anglo-Catholics. And they and others have sought for years to foster closer ties between the Anglican Communion and the Roman Catholic Church, and at this time they feel called to themselves become Catholics through these new structures to be established called ordinariates.
Now, this is a pretty radical and new, radical not in the sense that it is outrageous, radical in the sense that it's something that was so unexpected that Pope Benedict offered these ordinariates. What is an ordinariate? And then I want to play a little bite after you explain, which he concluded his recent trip to the UK with. But tell me, what is an ordinariate?
An ordinariate is, in a sense, very similar to a diocese, but they will be, their boundaries will cover the entire geography of a bishop's conference.
So they're not bound to any particular locale?
No. So, for instance, should one be established in the United States, the jurisdiction of the ordinariate would be all 50 states.
But there's been nothing established yet. They're still under review.
Correct. Correct. And so last year, when this Apostolic Constitution was issued by the Holy Father, it provided for the establishment of these ordinariates. But we're at the point now where we're seeing how much interest there is in these structures. And then the Vatican, the CDF, will make a decision as to whether or not to erect them in various countries.
I want to play a little bite of the Pope. This is at the very end of his UK visit. He said this to his bishops. Give a listen.
The other matter I touched upon in February with the bishops of England and Wales when I asked you to be generous in implementing the Apostolic Constitution Anglicanorum Coetibus. This should be seen as a prophetic gesture that can contribute positively to the developing relations between Anglicans and Catholics. It helps us to set our sights on the ultimate goal of all ecumenical activity, the restoration of full ecclesial communion, in the context of which the mutual exchange of gifts from our respective spiritual patrimonies serves as an enrichment to us all. Let us continue to pray and work unceasingly in order to hasten the joyful day when that goal can be accomplished.
One day my producers are going to learn how to cut bites down so they're concise, but I'm going to share with you what I thought was important there. A prophetic gesture. He called this a prophetic gesture. Tell me what that means to you. What was he saying there?
Well, it's certainly unprecedented. The Anglican Communion, the Roman Catholic Church have been engaged in ecumenical dialogues since the time of the Second Vatican Council. But we're at the point now where groups of Anglicans have felt compelled to request of the Holy See a provision whereby they corporately could be reunited with the Catholic Church. And the response to that is this apostolic constitution, Anglicanorum Coetibus. It's quite a mouthful.
It is. It is. The Latin is tough.
Yes, it is. It means groups of Anglicans. There's nothing exotic about it. But that's for whom this is intended, groups of Anglicans.
Now, it has been reported widely, and if you listen to the pronouncements of these 5 bishops who are joining in the full communion with the Catholic Church, they keep saying it was these issues of homosexuality, ordination of women, ordination of homosexuals, the position on abortion and these other moral issues that compelled them to seek another home.
That's certainly part of the equation. I think when in your opening monologue, you were talking about the increased distance between Anglicans and the Catholic Church. So the issues you just mentioned are symptomatic of what's been happening in recent history in the Anglican Communion. These 5 bishops and others feel that in good conscience they cannot live alongside folks who would ascribe to these beliefs.
Right.
But I think it's more important to stress that these folks feel called by the Holy Spirit to make this move. I know it's very easy to label them as malcontents or simply disaffected people, but the Holy Father said this is a prophetic gesture. These folks are responding to the guidance of the Holy Spirit. And so I think if you actually sat them down and interviewed them, they would say, this is the completion of a journey for me.
And these Anglican communities had been petitioning Rome for a good number of years before the Pope responded.
Oh,
absolutely. So this was a response to the outcry from this community.
Correct. This is not, as some have said, an effort at poaching Anglicans. This is a response on the part of the Catholic Church to, as you said, these groups who have, for at least 15 years, been seeking some sort of provision for them.
Now, Father, you yourself, we should say, were an Anglican before you used the pastoral provision set up by Pope John Paul II. Now, talk to me about that and how this new overture by Pope Benedict differs from the pastoral provision, and would you have used the Ordinariate?
Sure. The pastoral provision was established, as you said, by Pope John Paul II in 1980 in response to Anglicans who had been seeking some sort of way for priests who are married to enter the Catholic Church and be ordained as married priests. There are about, a little under 100 of us in the United States today. The pastoral provision for now is going to continue alongside Anglicanorum Coetibus. Similar but distinct vocations. Pastoral provision priests were diocesan priests. I'm a priest of the Archdiocese of Washington. Those who enter the Ordinariate will be priests of the Ordinariate. Okay?
Interesting.
Pastoral provision priests were normal diocesan guys. Ordinariates, there's going to be this attempt to preserve what's called an Anglican patrimony.
So they will have their own liturgies. I mean, I imagine you don't preserve the Anglican liturgy when you say Mass.
No, I say Mass right out of the sacramentary.
Novus Ordo,
correct,
as you'd see in any parish.
Right.
But this ordinariate would allow the continuation of Anglican practices, Anglican prayer books, all of the Anglican use practices. Yes.
Anglican liturgical flavor. It remains to be determined, what exact liturgical expression will be permitted in ordinariates, but it will retain Anglican language, tradition, flavors, and so forth.
So will this ordinariate be similar in when the layman encounters it to Atonement or Our Lady of Walsingham or that we see in San Antonio, Texas, for instance?
Absolutely.
Houston,
Absolutely.
right?
It's going to be very, very similar. In fact, I'll be at Atonement next week.
Yeah, there's this big conference happening there,
Correct.
Right? Now, tell me about that. You've got Catholics and Anglicans coming together there.
Sure.
What's happening there?
Our Lady of the Atonement is what is called an Anglican use parish. It is a Roman Catholic parish of the, I think it's the Archdiocese of San Antonio, I believe, but they use a liturgy from a book called the Book of Divine Worship, similar to Anglican Books of Common Prayer, but approved for use in Catholic churches. The pastor there issued an open invitation to anyone interested in Anglicanorum Coetibus to come down next week simply to get to know each other, because you have people from all over the United States who are interested in this. He said, if we're going to be in this ecclesial body together, let's come together, let's pray together, let's get to know each other. I think that's the primary intent.
This is the Becoming
gathering.
One conference in San Antonio this week.
Correct.
Oh, fascinating. There's an email that just came in from Jerry in Redondo Beach. He says, Raymond, do Anglican priests and bishops have valid holy orders? I thought they did not and therefore have to be reordained. True or false?
Officially, no. The Catholic Church does not recognize the validity of Anglican orders, so anyone coming in would need to be ordained as a Catholic cleric.
Oh, really interesting. Now, what elements of the Anglican worship will be preserved? When we hear that the Anglican practices will be retained,
sure,
what does that really mean?
That's yet to be determined, and there's a great deal of discussion right now taking place as to what constitutes Anglican patrimony. But I think most people would agree that it has much to do with music, with perhaps architecture, with some of the English language and the historic books of common prayer. I think that will characterize what ultimately is established as the norm for an ordinariate.
Now, Father, tell me how you and the Archdiocese of Washington will be responding to the people here who wish to come into full communion with the Church, Anglicans who wish. What is the process?
Sure. The process is that interested groups, clergy, individuals are now being invited to write to Cardinal Designate Wuerl, who's the delegate of the Congregation for the Doctrine of the Faith in Rome, and express their desire to be reconciled with the Catholic Church through an ordinariate. At some point, we will take all of these responses. They will be communicated to Rome, to the Vatican, and then a decision will be made as to whether or not to erect an ordinariate in the United States.
And all of these parishes, churches, groups would fall under the ordinariate then?
Correct.
No matter how far-flung they're...
The entire 50 United States.
Oh, really? So,
yeah.
so this is the ordinariate for the entire United States that would be erected?
Correct.
I see.
Yes.
I see. Fascinating. Now, when a whole Anglican or Episcopal church or parish decides they want to swim the Tiber and come into full communion, and I know that's happening in areas of the U.S. I've seen letters and communicated with some of these pastors. What happens then? Is the property conveyed? I know we've seen some stories here in Great Falls and Falls Church and other places where there were great contentious legal battles over the property.
Right.
What happens?
I think the expectation is that property matters would need to be resolved prior to a group entering the ordinariate. Okay, so it might involve a sale, it might involve a lease, it might involve a group having to potentially walk away from their property. And I think that's going to depend on the unique circumstances of each community.
Fascinating. Let's go to the phones. Fran from Virginia, you're on the World Over Live. What's your question, Fran?
Yeah, I'd like to know if and when the Anglican brothers and sisters join the Catholic Church, they will be following the teachings, I'm assuming, on birth control and abortion and infertility. Do you think that when this happens, it will put pressure on our own Catholic bishops and to then speak up for the teachings of the Church when it comes to abortion, infertility, and birth control?
Yeah.
I think.
Yeah, Fran, let's, if I can make one little intrusion here. I think the bishops, and certainly the bishops you've seen on this show and elsewhere, have been very vocal about these issues I think you mentioned. But answer the first part of that question.
Sure.
They will fully embrace the teachings
Absolutely.
of the Church.
In fact, the Apostolic Constitution states that the doctrinal norm for those in an ordinariate is the Catechism of the Catholic Church. And so the norms, expectations, beliefs, they're becoming Catholics, just with an Anglican flavor.
Yeah, so it's really, it's a stylistic question. I mean, it's the Pope, not unlike some of the Eastern rites, it is a different style of liturgy that falls within the embrace of Catholicism.
Correct, absolutely.
Fascinating. Let's talk for a moment, because I know there's been some prattling out there that the Holy Father, in making this overture, is also trying to remind the English-speaking world of the solemnity, the reverence, the possible beauty within the liturgy. And by allowing, again, he set up the extraordinary form of the Mass, the old Latin Mass, to exist side by side with the Novus Ordo. Now we will have this other high church incarnation of the liturgy. Is there something else here? Is there another lesson here for those of us who aren't Anglican and haven't been?
Oh, that might be for others to say. I will say that I think most of the Anglicans who are contemplating such a journey do place a value on more traditional reverential liturgy, and so that is a liturgical expression that they are bringing with them. And certainly by making this gesture, I think one could extrapolate that the Holy Father values this, or he wouldn't have done this.
Here's a very quick question here that I think you can easily answer. Do the converted Anglican priests have to use parts of the Catholic Mass, such as the exact words of consecration? And are there any known cases in which Anglicans are attracted to the extraordinary form, the Latin Mass? Ken from Delaware.
Goodness, I guess that's a two-part question.
A follow-up.
Right. Well, those those Catholics now who exist in these so-called Anglican use parishes and communities, they use this Book of Divine Worship, which is approved. And so all of the liturgical, the canon of the Mass and so forth are thoroughly consistent with Catholic doctrine.
Okay. Let's go to Jan from Washington. What's your question, Jan?
I was wondering if the new priests and bishops that are coming in need to receive the Roman apostolic rites, like the ordination to the priesthood?
Father?
Absolutely.
So they are all reordained?
They are all reordained.
Interesting.
Yes.
Do Anglicans believe in transubstantiation? This comes from Lynn.
Some Anglicans do, some Anglicans don't. There's no definitive Anglican understanding of the Eucharist. Those who are seeking to join the Catholic Church through an ordinariate would most certainly believe in transubstantiation.
We have a number of Anglican parishes in Canada that want to join the Catholic Church. Have these Canadians been invited to the meeting in Texas? Will Canada have its own ordinariate or be part of the USA? This is Barbara from West Vancouver, Canada.
Good question, and Canada is looking at establishing its own ordinariate. So I didn't organize the meeting in San Antonio, but I don't think anyone would be excluded. But I think the intent is for folks in the United States.
Okay. And it says here, this question I think we've answered. This is Mark. Will the ordinariate be part of the Roman Church, or will it be treated like the Eastern rites?
It is part of the Roman Church, okay? A new church is not being established. Ordinariates will follow the 1983 Code of Canon Law. In fact, the ordinary who will be appointed to lead the ordinariate will be a part of the U.S. Conference of Bishops.
Ah, interesting. I didn't realize that. How large are the numbers at this point? In the UK, we hear different reports. It's small numbers. It could be hundreds, and they're saying it would be good if it's a small group first, because you don't want to, one of the bishops said, you don't want to scare the horses by having everybody rush out at once.
Sure. I can only speak for the United States. And, right now we're hearing from communities. When a community writes to us and says, we are committed to doing this, we then respond by sending them a questionnaire. Who are you? Who's part of your community?
I see.
And we're just now getting those back. So it's probably a little premature to answer that question.
Father Scott Hurd, thank you so much for bringing some light on this very confusing and fascinating overture of the Pope, and I'm sure we'll be talking to you in the days ahead.
Super.
Thanks
My
for
pleasure.
being here. When we return, Peter Finney Jr. on the extraordinary life of Archbishop Philip Hannon. Wait till you hear about this amazing hero. The World Over Live continues in a moment. Stay with us.
Now, once again, Raymond Arroyo.
Welcome back to the World Over Live. In honor of Veterans Day, we thought it an ideal time to explore the life of a veteran, a priest, and a man who has truly touched the lives of thousands. Archbishop Philip Hannon is 97 years old, and despite a stroke last year, he's still very active. He recently released a memoir, The Archbishop Wore Combat Boots. The book was co-authored by my guest tonight. Would you welcome to the program the executive editor of the Clarion Herald, the official newspaper of the Archdiocese of New Orleans, Peter Finney Jr. Peter,
Raymond, thank you very much. Thank you.
And I feel like I'm home again. I should say Peter's son, and those of you who read the Mother Angelica biography, this is an interesting note. I don't take credit for his ordination, but Peter was one of my research assistants, really helped me a great deal assembling some of the material for the Mother Angelica biography. He is now a priest, ordained, studying in Rome.
That's right. He was ordained July the 10th in New Orleans. He's a priest of the Archdiocese of New Orleans, studying for his moral theology licentiate in Rome. He'll be back in June for good.
I love it. Well, please give him my best.
I will.
He's a great guy. Let's talk about Archbishop Philip Hannon. First of all, he's an amazing man. For anyone who grew up in New Orleans and lived there as we have, he is this larger-than-life figure. He confirmed me, gave me my high school ring. I mean, I could go down the list here. And even now, people will say, who's the Archbishop of New Orleans? Archbishop Hannon.
Archbishop Gregory Amen says the same thing. He got called for a radio interview last week, and it said, we're going to interview Archbishop Philip Amen, because they still thought, he says, as long as Archbishop Hannon is with us, he will be the Archbishop of New Orleans. That's the way it is. He's the spiritual icon of the city.
He really is. He's amazing. Yeah. Let's talk about his entrance into World War II, since we're talking about Veterans Day, and I know there's so many veterans watching. Archbishop Hannon, when he saw Pearl Harbor, he instantly knew he needed to be part of this effort. What happened?
And part of that was he studied in Rome as a seminarian at the North American College. So he saw the gathering storm. He saw the Nazism growing, and he had made tours of Germany and seen the Hitler youth, the Nazi youth, and the way they treated people. So he knew World War II was coming. He was a patriot. Two of his brothers were also in the army, so he wanted to join his brothers in the army, and he wanted to be a chaplain. He also not only wanted to be a chaplain, he wanted to be involved with a combat unit, and he fought to get into that, and he eventually did.
And he did indeed. He's amazing. In fact, he became the jump master in the 82nd Airborne. Now, the 82nd Airborne were these guys they would send it to hot battle situations. And not only was Archbishop Hannon in the combat unit, he was leading them out of the plane.
He had joined the 82nd Airborne, and they had some casualties. And so, but one of the rules was you had to jump out of a plane in order to keep your wings, in order to stay with the unit. And he said he didn't have any training. They gave him about 2 or 3 hours of training. He jumped out of the plane.
Boy.
And the next time he was the jump master.
And that takes real faith. I mean, talk about living faith. That's it.
It really does.
Now, he was in France, England, and Germany during the war. I mean,
That's
an
correct.
an amazing career in this airborne division.
He cared for both German and American soldiers who were wounded, and did the same thing for both sides. He really was a pastoral. He's always been a pastoral man. One of the most incredible things I think happened at the end of the war when they were liberating the concentration camps, and they had a man. About 800 prisoners were left out of 4,000 in this camp. They were all sticks and bones. He picked up this one man. There's a picture in the book. Yeah. This guy must have weighed 75 pounds, and he lifted it up and brought him to a hospital.
I want to show people, this is Archbishop Hannon from an interview we did several years ago, talking about that liberation experience, going into this German concentration camp. Take a look.
There was a wonderful, wonderful, heroic Belgian priest in there who was dying as we got in. I went in to try to help him. He said, "Don't pay any attention to me." He said, "I'm going." But he said, "You help the people." Fine. Wow. And so I said to him, "What kept you going for almost 6 years?" He said, "I could always bribe one of the guards, and I could get enough wine to say a mass every night when they were gone." Wow. And he said, "That's what kept me going." And he said, "That's what enabled me to serve these men." And the day after we arrived, he died. And it was the most impressive funeral I've ever been in my life, without any exception. Wow. Every man in that camp who could walked behind his body as it was being carried just on a wooden plank to the nearby woods for funeral. And they didn't invite me because I was not a part of that fraternity of suffering. It's a very, very strict bond, to that. And I admire them for that.
So how did this experience and being on the front lines with these men in combat, how did it shape his priesthood and later his episcopacy? It
shaped his life. He could see firsthand the dangers of Nazism and fascism and communism. He saw it all, at first hand, and he determined that the United States was uniquely situated to be a force for good in the world, and that came through at Vatican II when he made the intervention about using deterrence, deterrence of nuclear weapons. The U.S. It was not necessarily a moral evil because the U.S. needed that power to be able to help, to help the world. Right. No, I used to love when at the bishops' conference, whenever they discussed these these war statements, we want to send the administration a letter that they have to stop the war. Inevitably, Archbishop Hannon would get up and he said, "My brother bishops, how many of you have been in a foxhole? I want to know. I want to know." Oh, absolutely. The room would fall silent. Absolutely. He was amazing. There was a Polish woman, the Polish women camp. This lady had forged a rosary out of black bread, and she at the end of 2 or 3 years of confinement, she was liberated by Archbishop Hannon, and she said, "Will you bless my rosary?" And he said, "No, your rosary has already been blessed by your daily life, and the Lord has blessed you." She says, "No." The lady said to him, "No, I want you to bless it." And he went ahead and blessed it. "You're a priest, bless my rosary." But he said that lady's profound faith touched him for his entire life. Astounding. Yeah. I want to give you another little bite here. This is Archbishop Hannon reflecting on his time with the 82nd Airborne Division. Take a look.
These men were totally dedicated. Now, young people always think of death. I mean, they have an abhorrence of death. But these men took risks knowing that they certainly could die from it, but they did it very, very willingly, and they did look after each other. I mean, there was no doubt about it that when, say, a machine gunner at a forward post, he had 2 men to guard him, you see. Right. He could always rely on them staying with him until unless they got killed. And that was the force in the paratroopers that kept it going and kept it so successful. And that's the reason why they still have a special salute. They salute and simply say, "All the way." Huh. That's their code, all the way.
I want to talk about the mark of that division on him when we talk a little later about Katrina and his experience in Hurricane Katrina, because we see the ghosts of the 82nd Airborne coming back. Talk about his 15-year relationship with John F. Kennedy. It's curious that and I was wondering why you all made this decision to put the Kennedys at the top of the book here. The decision was made because he had a personal relationship, a silent, confidential relationship with JFK, and also had a personal relationship with Jackie.
he decided to publish letters, personal letters from Jackie Kennedy, who wrote him 3 or 4 letters after the assassination, in which she expressed her profound despair and also her love for her husband, knowing that he was a womanizer. She knew all about it. Archbishop Hannon did not know about it, but she poured out her love for him. He wanted to show those letters to rebut the argument that it was a marriage of convenience, and that was really the reason he also, because of the Kennedy connection. It was silent all in Kennedy's run up to the White House, because if Kennedy had made it known that he was talking to a Catholic cleric on the way to the White House, no Catholic had ever been elected president, it would have been poison for his...
And he was his confidant, but not his confessor.
That's right.
Archbishop Hannon and I had spoken about that before,
correct.
But some way I had taken away that he was his confessor.
No, he never heard Kennedy's confession, no. And he said that had he known about the womanizing, he certainly would have confronted him about that. But it didn't come up, in any of the official conversations they had.
The book is fascinating in the light it sheds on Jackie and John F. Kennedy. When we come back, I do want to talk about the point that Kennedy is regarded as the politician that first allowed the divorce between faith and public service, that later Archbishop Hannon, of all people, would excoriate politicians for, even friendly politicians and friends of his. Let's look at this little bite. This is Archbishop Hannon talking about his relationship with John F. Kennedy.
As he went up the ladder, it became very obvious that if he went and talked things over with Archbishop O'Boyle, who was the Archbishop of Washington, D.C., then, of course, that would be anathema to the Protestants. On the other hand, it wouldn't be good for the Catholics if he turned down some suggestion. So all the time there was that tension, there was that difficulty. Now, of course, he needed advice at certain times about what would the church expect of him, so on and so on. Small things, then big things. For instance, small thing was when he met the Pope. Shall I make a genuflection and kiss his ring? I said, oh, don't even think of that. That's not going to go over with non-Catholics. And I said, this Pope was John the 23rd. I said, he'll understand better than you even why you're not genuflecting and kissing his ring.
Now, that's an interesting observation there. The canniness of Archbishop Hannon, which continues, I think, to this day.
Oh, yeah. He growing up in Washington, he did not have any fear of politicians. He said too many bishops treat politicians as though they're 10 feet tall. He knew, growing up in Washington, that they were just, they wanted to know the church's position, and he felt, very easy to tell them. I mean, he was very open with politicians.
Let's fast forward to something later. In 1996, Senator Mary Landrieu, the daughter of Moon Landrieu, the former mayor of New Orleans, a close friend. The family was very close to Archbishop Hannon, and as you said, he's this iconic figure in New Orleans. Absolutely. In 1996, he gets up and says, not only should no Catholic vote for any politician who supports abortion, he explicitly pointed out Mary Landrieu, fingered her by name, and said Catholics shouldn't vote for her.
That's right.
What was the fallout from that?
It was tremendous fallout. Certainly Moon, the father, was extremely hurt. The fatherly pride, I think, was really, it really got to him. Yeah. They have mended fences since that point. The Archbishop's point was this. It was clear that Mary Landrieu, who was nominally a Catholic, had taken votes, specific votes, she supported Clinton's veto of the ban on partial birth abortion, and she also supported Roe versus Wade as a law of the land. And the Archbishop made the point: if a Catholic in good conscience, knowing what the Catholic Church teaches, they should really not vote for a Catholic politician who espouses those views. And also, she had received $300,000 from Emily's List, which only supported women, Democratic women who supported abortion rights.
Yeah, no, he's an amazing man. I mean, as I remember, the scorn he took at the time. I mean, the media came after him, the Catholics on the ground came after him, the politicians came after him, and he stood his ground. And that I think is the mark of Archbishop Hannon. He's a man who speaks the truth with charity, but clearly there's no No fuzziness when it comes to his pronouncement.
There's one little, Mary has since voted against partial birth abortion. So there's been a little bit of a crack in there. So that there's some hope that maybe she might be moving in that direction.
Let's talk about his. He is one of the last living bishops to attend Vatican II.
That's right.
And to be a participant at Vatican II.
Not only was he a participant, he organized the press panel. The U.S., because of its wealth and its knowledge of communications, he organized the daily briefings for the world's media to answer questions. And it was when he was at one of those Vatican press conferences that he got word that he was going to be named Archbishop of New Orleans, and that's how it all happened.
I want people to listen to this. This is his reflection, years later, of course, on Vatican II, and how some confuse the implementation of Vatican II. I had Cardinal Avery Dulles and Archbishop Hannon on the show that night together. Here's a little clip.
We have to remember the time of the ending of the Second Vatican Council, the whole country was engaged, and possibly the whole world, or at least part of it, engaged in a sexual revolution and a moral revolution. And you've got to remember that we had Woodstock at that time.
Right.
We had the great change in dress of women. You had bikinis coming in and all that.
Right.
And then at the same time, you had the decision of the Supreme Court 73 about abortion,
right,
which really hit a strong blow at the dignity of the individual. Now, all of those things converged, and it seems to me that the Second Vatican Council has been misjudged as being more or less a part of that and catering to that. It certainly was not, it is not now. But the trouble was that the church is made up of many human beings, and many of them saw or thought they saw or did not read the documents before they came to the conclusion the church is changing too.
Archbishop Hannon on Vatican II. And no one, I think, has over his long career tried to articulate the true intentions of Vatican II like Archbishop Hannon.
Oh, absolutely. And in terms of abortion, he said, there are things that you can argue about welfare and education and social issues for a person, but what good does it do if you're dead? And that's been his constant theme.
Now, he was named Archbishop of New Orleans while at the council 3 weeks after Hurricane Betsy laid waste to so many churches, so much church property and the city of New Orleans. What did that 82nd Airborne experience teach him, parachuting into that situation, that disaster zone?
It was just a perfect parallel. He got on the ground and did the walk. He walked through the neighborhoods, and that was what people loved. To this day, Tropical Storm Juan in the 80s, he was out sandbagging levees with regular crews. So when people see those kind of pictures, it just endears him to them. And he always said, if you do something, even if it turns out wrong, people are going to give you the benefit of the doubt for doing something. And that's whenever he felt he was right, he went ahead and did it, and people love him for that.
Yeah, no, he was always, in my memory, he was always present and in the front, willing to speak out and engage and mix in, even in the controversies of life and in the controversies of the day.
Integration, deep South, there was no place for blacks to swim. Right. The Archbishop opened the Notre Dame Seminary swimming pool during the summer for kids who were going to enrichment camps because the New Orleans recreation swimming pools all of a sudden were breaking down
the
pumps were not working anymore. He said, I'll tell you what I'm going to do. I'm going to open up a seminary swimming pool. And stuff like that goes a long way. He is revered in New Orleans among the African-American community.
Now, Katrina came in 2005. Archbishop Hannon, then long retired, but here he is talking about what he was doing while Katrina hit. Take a look.
We have, of course, a great deal of money invested there, and I wanted to make absolutely sure that none of the looters would get in. So I went there myself. And the building itself was extremely strong. And, of course, I didn't have any place to sleep except the floor. It was hot as a dickens. There's no water. There is no electricity and nothing. But I had some crackers, and I had some drinking water, and that was it. So as far as I'm concerned, I've lived through worse days than that. It was no trouble at all, as far as I'm concerned.
Archbishop, you're 92 years old. I mean, I can't imagine. You went alone? There was no one with you?
Sure. Oh, well, why not?
Oh, I know. Well, look, you're worth about 8 or 10 men. I know you.
I can say that, but anyway, there was only one person who finally banged in the door and came in, and I yelled at him. I said, "Who's there?" And he said, "Oh, Archbishop." So I knew that wasn't a looter.
Okay. Thank God it wasn't a looter.
He said he had a golf club. And I said, well, Archbishop, what are you going to do at 92 with a golf club? He says, well, if the power went out, it would get dark. I knew the lay of the land, and the looter would not know, so I could just hit him on the head.
See?
So,
spoken like a true combat veteran. I like that. But he was there in Katrina, and not only, he was talking about his television studio on Metairie Road there that he was protecting, worried that the looters might get in. But when he left, tell people what happened when, a few days later, he walked out of that
4 or 5 days later, he said, okay, everything's okay. I'm going to try to get across the lake. The causeway is a 24-mile bridge on the North Shore, to the North Shore. Of course, it was closed off by the Jefferson Parish deputies, but they saw him in his collar, and they said, well, Archbishop, you're really not supposed to go across, but we'll let you go. He talked his way through. He said it was the easiest drive of his life. Nobody else was on the bridge. So he got across, but he went immediately to the St. Tammany Parish Sheriff's deputies, where all these first responders who were going on fumes, they were just dead tired. He gave a pep talk, as only Archbishop Hannon could give, and the sheriff of St. Tammany Parish said grown men were crying because they just were overcome by what he was doing for them to pump them up, and that's exactly what he did. And then about a week later, the Vatican sent over Archbishop Cortez to view the damage. We took a helicopter trip from Baton Rouge over New Orleans, and we landed in Biloxi. Nothing but devastation. We get out of the helicopter, and the blades are whirring around, and we get down on the grass in this grass field, and there is Archbishop Hannon, 92 years old, with his cameraman, filming people as they're coming off the helicopter. He beat the helicopter over to Biloxi. I mean, it's incredible what the guy can do.
He's an incredible man.
Yeah.
How is he now, and why did he wait so long to write the memoir? What is he, 90? He was 94 when this project started.
He was like about 94. His cousin, Nancy Collins, who's a journalist in New York, he called her in 2007 and said, you know, I'm thinking about doing my memoirs. And Nancy said, well, not a minute too soon.
Yeah, exactly.
And so they needed to get, somebody to kind of help, because his life is like this, and we had to do it like this. So, and it kind of fill in the blank. So over a course of about 2.5 years, every Saturday, just go over there and sit across the dining room table with him and type as he talked, and that was it.
Wow. Yeah.
And he had written a bunch of stuff already, and it was just kind of fine-tuned, so he did a great job.
No, it's a beautiful book. It's The Archbishop Wore Combat Boots, From Combat to Camelot to Katrina. What a life. I mean, he's always been one of my heroes, and if you read this, I think he'll soon be one of yours. It's available at bookstores everywhere and through the EWTN Religious Catalog. I have to ask you one quick question. How is he doing now?
He's doing okay. He had a stroke in October, so that slowed him down a little bit, but 2 weeks ago, he went to Archbishop Chappelle High School to talk to a girls' class that's reading the book. He was taken in a wheelchair because it was a long distance. He got to the door and said, no, I'm going to walk in. As soon as he walked in the door, he saluted the girls. And the girls just loved him. They asked him questions. He answered all the questions, and he did a great job.
He's amazing.
He
Archbishop Hannon, and we certainly send our love and prayers to you and hope you'll keep us in yours.
That's
and
right.
Peter Finney,
Thank you,
so
Raymond.
much. My
really
best for the family and everybody at home.
Thank you.
Well, that is all the time we have. Until next week, you can find updates and the occasional commentary by following me on Twitter at twitter.com/Raymond Arroyo, or on my Facebook fan page. I always preview the upcoming show. Take your suggestions. It's a lot of fun, so go there. And Christmas is coming. To that end, the prayers and personal devotions of Mother Angelica is still in bookstores everywhere. It makes a wonderful gift, as does my latest project. It is the only Catholic, fully dramatized, word-for-word audio Bible available anywhere. It's called The Truth and Life Dramatic Audio Bible, or Dramatized Audio Bible. Michael York, Brian Cox, Blair Underwood, and many other incredible actors bring the Scriptures to life as never before. Go to RaymondArroyo.com for more information. Click on the banner at the top of the home site to order, and that will give you the EWTN Special Edition, which I know you'll want to share with friends and keep as a gift in your own home. Until next week, we'll be scouting the world over for all that is seen and unseen. On behalf of the staff and crew of EWTN News, I'm Raymond Arroyo. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time. Bye now.